These are the Sunday recommendations for Patreon subscribers, October 14th, 2018. First up, from Portraits to Puddles, the third in the series. This one is on the Coast Guard Memorial. This one includes a quick survey of war memorials in Manhattan through the First World War. Second recommendation, Rite of Derby, Experiment with an Air Pump. This painting was mentioned by Yaron Brook in his podcast on painting in Western civilization, which was inspired by a visit to the National Gallery in London, where this painting lives. Painting is about 6 by 8 feet. The gallery's site and Wikipedia discuss it in detail, so I thought I'd give you instead a quote from Sir Kenneth Clarke's Civilization. As usual, I find Clarke thought-provoking, even when I don't entirely agree with his premises. Beginning of a long quote. The aims of the Encyclopedia, by the Frenchman Diderot, seem harmless enough to us, but authoritarian governments don't like dictionaries. They live by lies and bamboozling abstractions and can't afford to have words accurately defined. The Encyclopedia was twice suppressed, and by its ultimate triumph, the polite reunions in these elegant salons became precursors of revolutionary politics. They were also precursors of science. The illustrated supplement of the Encyclopedia is full of pictures of technical processes, most of which, I must admit, had changed very little since the Renaissance. In the last quarter of the 18th century, science was fashionable and romantic, as one can see from the work of Rite of Derby. His picture of an experiment with an air pump brings us to the new age of scientific invention. It is an admirable example of narrative painting. The natural philosopher with his long hair and dedicated stare, the little girls who can't bear to witness the death of their pet cockatoo, the sensible middle-aged man who tells them that such sacrifices must be made in the interest of science, and the thoughtful man on the right who is wondering if this kind of experiment is really going to do mankind much good. They are all taking it quite seriously, but nonetheless, science was to some extent an after-dinner preoccupation, like playing the piano in the next century. Even Voltaire, who spent a vast amount of time on weighing molten metal and cutting up worms, was only a dilettante. He lacked the patient, pedestrian realism of the experimenter, and perhaps such tenacity exists only in a milieu where quick-wittedness is less highly valued. End of quote. Next up, Paul Bartlett's Bearcub Grooming, 1887. On a trip through the Metropolitan Museum, I snapped an image of this piece because, honestly, it was just so cute. But there's more to it. When I eventually read the Metropolitan's website entry on it, I learned that this was a spin-off in reduced size of Bartlett's Bohemian Bear Tamer, a full-size work in the American Wing Courtyard. To profit from that sculpture's popularity, Bartlett sold reductions of the main figure in each of the bears, an income-increasing technique that St. Gaudens had used frequently. About the full-size version, the Metropolitan Museum gives a much wider context. Another quote. It depicts a well-muscled gypsy with 2 bear cubs, one diligently responding to the animated snap of its trainer's fingers, the other lazily scratching behind its ear. The bears are not aware of their potential brute power. Thus, the underlying theme is man's superiority as the thinking species. Bartlett was inspired not only by itinerant animal shows he had seen around Paris, but also by intense contemporary interest in the evolutionary principles of Charles Darwin and the 1868 discovery of Paleolithic skeletons at Cro-Magnon in southwest France. End of the quote. And the fourth recommendation, for my Patreon subscribers only. While I was searching for an image to use on the cover of Webster's The Skyman, I stumbled across the seascapes of Ayvazovsky, 1817 to 1900. He's a Russian romantic painter. I'm a sucker for the luminous, and his works remind me of them, so I like them very much. Ayvazovsky claimed to have created some 6,000 paintings in his lifetime, But alas, the Metropolitan Museum owns none of his large-scale works. But in 1887, when Iwasowski held an anniversary party to celebrate his painting career, he presented each of the 150 guests with a 10 by 7 inch photo of himself that was inset with a hand-painted seascape. The Metropolitan Museum owns one of these hybrids, which is on the left. Although as I write this, they don't have it on view. But if the pictures here appeal to you, go check out his works on WikiArt. Thanks for listening. If you don't already belong to the Free Sunday Recommendations list, the URL and email are there. You can support me starting at $5 a month or follow me for free on Patreon. And check out DianeDurantewriter.com for hundreds of posts on sculpture, painting, Central Park, and my other obsessions. Thank you for listening.